So, welcome everybody to the latest in the Jellyfish On webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about how to really get the most out of your first party data to amplify and drive the performance of your Google Shopping campaigns. My name's Tom Woods. I'm Data and Analytics Director here at Jellyfish, and my role and remit is all things data measurement and activation across a number of our key paid media clients. And I'm here today with the brilliant Stevie and Katie, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi everyone, I'm Stevie. So I'm Paid Search Director at Jellyfish. I've been here for 4 years now after coming from a smaller agency. So I've worked in paid search for nearly 9 years now. I predominantly work across e-commerce clients just due to my background in fashion marketing. And over the years, I've grown to become the Google Shopping expert at Jellyfish.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Martin. I'm a senior partner lead at Google, having worked here for now almost 11 years. And I currently partner with some of our top brands across fashion, footwear, and fitness, working with everyone on their digital marketing strategies. And I am currently living in San Francisco.
Well, thanks, Tim. So we've got a jam-packed agenda for you today. So firstly, we're going to be talking about the market context of what we're seeing on the shopping landscape and why we believe that gaining a competitive advantage on that landscape is more important than ever. We'll then jump into the fundamentals of the foundations of what a great shopping campaign is. So Stevie's going to talk us through the brilliant basics of shopping feeds. And then what we have is the next piece, which is really kind of building on those foundations and kind of really activating on a lot of the first party data that we know a lot of advertisers have so that we can start to activate and drive in a smarter way. Then finally, the proof is in the pudding, where we'll go through our fantastic case study for UGG and Mia. We'll then round off with the key takeaways. And then lastly, we will field a bit of a Q&A session at the end. So feel free throughout the presentation to just drop any questions that you may have into the Q&A chat, and we'll pick it up at the end. So with regards to the market context and what we're seeing on the landscape, so 4 key things really. So firstly, significant expenditure in Google Shopping, and Katie will touch on that in a little bit more detail on the next slide, but we're really seeing smart shopping and soon to be Performance Max really growing as part of our wider digital marketing mixes across a lot of clients and advertisers that we speak to. Now, because of that, there's increased competition on the landscape, which means that the cost to compete then naturally increases with a lot more advertisers and e-commerce retailers vying for that attention on the platform. And then compounding those 2 key points, it really is that focus on return on ad spend. So digital marketers are becoming under increased scrutiny to justify that media spend because of that increased competition and significant expenditure. And with those 3 things in mind, we really do believe that across the industry, data thinking really isn't leveraged as effectively as it could be across brands and their agencies and retailers. And that's what we're going to touch on a little bit more detail later on today.
Thanks, Tom. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about what we as Google are seeing from a consumer behavior perspective, as well as some of the changes in the retail and digital ecosystem. Throughout the last decade, we've witnessed significant shifts in the consumer behavior, both from the way we connect with others, the way we learn, and even work, obviously being from home right now. And since the onset of the pandemic, these changes have really been amplified and accelerated. Today, we know that more people than ever are shopping online. And in fact, when we look at holiday of 2021, we saw a 61% increase over the 2 years prior in 2019. And while they might be buying more online, consumers are actually really agnostic to the channel they're buying from, choosing online and offline based on a variety of factors such as ease or convenience. This further increased the complexity of the consumer journey, with, in some instances, over 500 plus touch points before purchasing. This, in addition to the changes in the digital ecosystem, which I'll touch on in a second, are making your jobs as marketers and retailers even more complex. Jump to the next slide. Perfect. And more specifically, if we think about privacy changes over the last few years, this is forcing retailers to find new ways to interact with customers. In today's retail landscape, consumer expectations are higher than ever, with many expecting brands and retailers to provide the most relevant experience possible. However, as we know, privacy standards and regulations have raised the bar, causing these normal personalization tactics to become even less effective or even obsolete. Think about the use of cookies. So these two opposing marketplace conditions pose a challenge to retailers as they, one, try and balance customer frustration over lack of relevance, with 65% claiming a negative experience when that's the case, and two, acknowledging a higher threshold for personal information privacy. So this requires a new vision and a new strategy forward. So what do? Well, as we adapt in a privacy-safe world with a more complex consumer, the use of automated solutions that allow you to be present with what we say is the right message at the right time, aligned to the right goal, is going to be incredibly critical. I think it's always helpful if we kind of take a look back to see how Google continues to innovate and to see how the consumer has evolved. So if we look back to 1999, Google's been enhancing search and expanding our ecosystem well beyond search. The backbone of our innovation, though, has always been data, which allows us to constantly build better and simplify our products for all of our users, both consumers and advertisers. However, if we think about the data that was needed in 2002, that supported 2002 tactics. The data that's needed in 2022 is much different because the technology and the needs are different. Today, we're leveraging automation throughout all of our ad products, which allows partners like you to be helpful. It lets you be relevant and engaging to your audience while meeting today's privacy standards. The focus of what Jellyfish used with UGG, which we'll dig into soon, is smart shopping, which uses machine learning to drive simplicity, performance, and reach. And as you'll hear more throughout this year, and what Tom referenced at the start, is that Google's next major product release, called Performance Max, is the next iteration of our machine learning technology for shopping. Now I'm going to pass it to Stevie to talk about the fundamentals of what a great shopping campaign is.
Thanks, Katie. So firstly, just before we do, we wanted to touch on a couple of key points. So we really do believe that all e-commerce brands and retailers can make better use of their first-party data to gain a competitive advantage on the shopping landscape. We've covered off that context already in terms of what we're seeing both from a brand and tech perspective, but also a consumer's perspective as well. But really, before we can really kind of drive performance through automated and data thinking, we need to lay those foundations. So Stevie's going to take us through what that entails.
Thanks, Tom and Katie. So yeah, before we dive into how you can take your shopping campaigns to the next level, it's important just to make sure that you have the basics covered first. So what we want to do is ensure your shopping feed isn't missing any data to start with, just to make sure there's no disapprovals as well in the feed, because you could be missing out on revenue, and these often lead to account suspension if not resolved. So try to make use of all the attributes where possible, even the optional ones. So I know we might get tempted to leave these blank because they're not mandatory, but they do give Google more information about your product, which helps with relevancy. So applying optional data will also mean that your ads look more appealing, so it's definitely worth adding. If your product titles are missing any key product information, updating these to include colors and sizes, for example, will result in better visibility and higher click-through rates and conversion rates. It's also important just to check that you've made sure the Google product categories and product types are really relevant and as granular as possible, as this also helps your ads match the most relevant search queries, and it helps with campaign segmentation. So ensuring you've got the basics covered can be made easier if you work with a third-party provider, but it is also possible to optimize your shopping feed yourself using supplemental feeds in Google Merchant Center. So once you've made sure your feed's in a really strong position, you can then shift to a more advanced level by transforming your product feed to carry out data-driven automated optimizations using first-party data via custom labels. So this allows you to serve highly relevant and appealing ads. So Tom's going to go into a bit more detail around how we achieve this in the next section.
Thanks, Stevie. So yeah, jumping off, using that as a jump off point, and the foundations to then really kind of drive performance through data. We really do believe that all advertisers are sat on a wealth of data that can be used for activation in a privacy safe way. Really, performance metrics are just the tip of the iceberg. So your clicks, impressions, spend and revenue. There's a wealth of other data that can be utilized to inform that activation, from perhaps CRM segments to understand the types of audiences that buy certain product categories, through to website analytics and understanding the influence of landing page optimization on driving certain product purchases too. Now at Jellyfish, we've created a solution called Data-Driven Shopping that really helps to discover the types of data that is available for clients and advertisers, to really kind of make sense of that and utilize it for activation on Google Shopping. Now we've created this product matrix, and we use it really to categorize different products within our e-commerce clients' inventory. We categorize them based on whether something is high performing or low performing. And that's your traditional bread and butter revenue and ROAS metrics. So whether it's got high revenue or high ROAS, it's high performing; low revenue, low ROAS, low performing. Simple so far. And then from a fundamentals perspective, what we mean here is that they demonstrate the propensity or the potential to become a bestseller. And we do that through a bit of data discovery to understand what information is available on these products. And that can be things from margin through to stock depth, doing a bit of discovery into price competitiveness. So really understanding whether or not brands or retailers are selling the same products that we are, but at a lower price point. So they're undercutting us on the landscape. Also looking at buy to detail rate as well, which is the natural conversion rate from the product detail page on the website. These are all the types of things that we can use to determine whether or not something has the potential to become a bestseller, and we should be advertising it more within our smart shopping campaigns. And this is what each category means, ranked in terms of priority. So high-performing, strong fundamental products are traditional bestsellers. So, you know, these are the cash cows that everybody wants to buy as soon as they're in, they fly off the shelves. And so therefore their ranking and priority is high because they're cheap to acquire and also high in terms of revenue or profitability. We then have the next category, which is low-performing but strong fundamental products. Now, these are products that might not necessarily have as much revenue or return associated to them, but through the data discovery that we've done, we can understand that they have the attributes to become potential bestsellers. So whether or not, you know, that we're competitive on price, you know, should then actually impact whether or not the CPCs could be higher or lower, which we're then able to generate a return, an efficient return. Or alternatively, if they have a high propensity from the product detail page, and we've noticed that within Google Analytics, naturally, if we push more of those products into the feed, it should naturally convert at a higher rate. And it's just really giving them the visibility that they need to become bestsellers. The next category is high performing, poor fundamentals. And these are selling well. So, you know, there's the high revenue, but the cost to compete and the cost to acquire is a bit higher compared to the others. So we should think, you know, we can maintain visibility here, but perhaps we could shift some of that inefficient spend into areas that demonstrate higher potential. And then finally, we have these low performing, poor fundamental products, which aren't selling at all and are costly to acquire. So those are the products that we just shouldn't be advertising at all. And any of the spend that was going into those products should be shifted into the other areas that should ultimately drive performance and growth. What this process should then lead to in terms of performance over time is that controlling those products mean that we ensure that the best-selling products are always visible. So those bestsellers, we'll continue to advertise those because we know that they sell well. But also then, as I said, bring previously undervalued products up into the feed so that they have the reach and the impressions to potentially deliver that return. We then do that through minimizing the wasted spend on products that are less likely to sell. So it's just shifting those budgets around in a smarter way. And what that then leads to over time is a more diverse set of products are being advertised and sold. We've seen this in a couple of cases with our clients where they were focusing on a smaller portfolio of products within the inventory. And when we actually launched this solution, we were able to drive more impressions and more sales across a broader set of their inventory and not just those potential bestsellers. What that then should do in terms of performance as well is bring new incremental users into the brand that may not have actually known them for these undervalued products that are becoming on trend. And then what that should do then in terms of performance is maximize effectiveness and return, because we're shifting that wasted spend into areas that should have more potential. And that's then demonstrated on this graph here, whereby we have our strong fundamentals in green. So if we increase our coverage on the impressions and the advertising on those products, we do that through funding, through the minimizing of the spend of the products that we don't think have the ability to perform. We're then naturally increasing our sales over time, because those products that have strong fundamentals then actually become high performing over time, because we're giving them the opportunity to be sold in the feed. And over time, the SKU sales increase. And because of that, return on ad spend and also share of voice, which is another key point around that competitiveness that we were talking about. Increasing the number of impressions across a broader set of products means that we're getting the brand out there and on the landscape in a more efficient way. Now, this is the geeky bit. This is the factory floor of how everything's built. And we're keen to stress here that this is completely automated. So back to Katie's point on really kind of harnessing the power of AI and algorithms to be able to automate this so that operationally we can also become more efficient, is what this does in practice. So through data discovery, we look to understand what types of metrics we can use for that categorization. In this case, we're using price competitiveness data and the product IDs through Google Merchant Center. We then bring that into BigQuery alongside revenue and buy to detail rates from Google Analytics, and then ROAS from SA360, so from the bidding platform. We then run our custom algorithm that categorizes all of the products. We then push that into the feed, so into those feed providers that Stevie was talking about earlier. And those are then again made available in Google Merchant Center. And then what happens is those products are labeled with the categories, and then campaigns are built off of them through Google Ads, which are then obviously made available through a bidding platform such as SA360, where we can start to control the bids. And Stevie will speak a little bit shortly on how this is all activated in practice. We're keen to stress here that this is a virtuous cycle. So as soon as performance is pushed through these pipes here, it's then flushed out in the performance that's then made available in SA360 and website performance. And so then it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy in that the algorithm drives the performance of certain products, and we get to more learnings and more data is acquired on the trends of the products. And it again then fuels the feeds that then drive the performance. And also just lastly, we wanted to stress the importance of thinking a little bit more laterally about the categorizations that we've spoken about. So as well as just for activation for Google Shopping, we're able to use this more meaningfully across the broader e-commerce landscape and teams. So the categorizations of products can really inform trading and merchandising decisions, because we're able to understand at what price points retailers and other advertisers are selling our products at, and whether or not we're being potentially undercut. And that can then feed into buying decisions and whether or not we need to negotiate better margin for different things. Similarly as well, that propensity that we were talking about through the buy to detail rate is natural kind of demand picking up. So we should be able to understand what products and what product categories are becoming on trend. So, if for a fashion brand, for example, and when people are starting to think about their summer wear, as I'm sure we all are in the UK at the moment. And we can use all of these decisions to promote products on site, manage website product assets more optimally, but also, just more broadly thinking about what what this data can be used for outside of just paid media activation. But on that point, I'll pass over to Stevie to talk a little bit about how we activate this.
Thanks, Tom. So I'm now going to run through how we then use this data to inform how we manage our bids and budgets. So what we do is we use custom labels to apply the logic to each individual SKU within the feed. We have 4 campaigns split by these custom labels. So the high performing, strong fundamental labels are obviously highest priority. So I know Tom ran through this a minute ago. So they are obviously assigned a higher budget and a low ROAS target, just to ensure the campaign's reach isn't limited. The low performing poor fundamental labels are lower priority. So they're assigned a lower budget and a high ROAS target, just to limit the traffic because we expect these products to underperform. So the entire process is fully automated. Data is actually reviewed daily for each SKU based on the last 14 days of data. So that means the products will move automatically between these campaign types based on their potential and how well they're performing. We also recognise that Google is moving shopping to a more black box approach, but we just wanted to point out that we can still provide the same granularity and relevance with this approach across smart shopping and Performance Max campaigns as well. So data-driven shopping is fully automated, and it does use bid strategies to ensure all bid optimizations are automated too. So this not only results in stronger performance, but it saves your team time on daily and weekly optimizations, which is why this optimization schedule looks fairly light. And I'm sure all paid search practitioners will be pleased to see this. So on a daily basis, the bidding algorithm takes care of all bid optimizations based on your target ROAS. On a weekly basis, we may just have to monitor and adjust campaign level budgets accordingly based on category level performance. On a monthly basis, we review bid strategy targets just to determine if any amends need to be made based on category performance, because this can often shift with seasonality depending on the market. We also review Smart Shopping or Performance Max asset performance to review if any updates need to be made here to improve performance or align with monthly media plans. So on a quarterly basis, the only changes really needed would be to reflect the quarterly media plans. So you may need to shift focus if you're moving into a new season, or maybe update any assets or ad copy in line with product launches. So I'm now going to hand over to Katie to run through the challenges we faced on UGG and why data-driven shopping was so important for them.
Thanks, Stevie. So as I'm sure most of you know, UGG is known for its iconic classic boot, and more recently, the Fluff Yeah slipper. Like many of you, UGG became my personal go-to choice of footwear. I'm actually wearing them right now, just can't see it. Over the last couple of years, UGG faced increased competition for consumers, especially in EMEA. And on one hand, they had limited price control with wholesalers. And on the other hand, there was a growing number of imitation brands all looking for a piece of UGG's growing market share. So this competition, both within the digital landscape, started to really impact their profitability, with consumers choosing to come to the site to shop, but then ultimately purchasing elsewhere. So rather than lower the price of their core product, which is not what to do, and impact overall return, they wanted to find an alternative approach that would allow them to both maintain profitability, growth, and relevance with the consumer. So this is when they turned to Jellyfish to try to come up with what that solution might be.
Cool, thanks, Katie. So obviously we've done a deep dive already into the approach, but I just wanted to summarize what exactly we did and kind of explain all the bits that Tom just ran through. So we obviously started by doing a data discovery for UGG, just to uncover the most relevant and suitable metrics. So every retailer is going to be slightly different. For some, I guess competition and price might not be as much of an issue, but data-driven shopping is still valuable because we can look at other metrics, and it includes things like buy to detail rate, which isn't factored in as part of Google's algorithm. So we use BigQuery to pull our data sources together and automate the process of applying our custom labels. We use real-time data from GA and SA360. The data is analyzed alongside the price competitiveness data from Google Merchant Center. So this allowed us to not only see performance for each SKU, but also show how much potential they have to perform. So the automated labeling then allows the team to manage the bids and budgets based on each product's performance and potential. So we also built a dashboard just to help us monitor the performance over the launch and keep an eye on how each label was performing over time. So this actually was really valuable for both the team and from a reporting point of view, and also the client as well. So it was a great move to do that. So on to the results. We applied data-driven shopping to UGG and grew their revenue by 224%. This was made possible because the rollout of data-driven shopping led to an increase in ROAS by 151% and CPCs declined by 18%. This was actually despite competition on the landscape remaining really high. So year on year, we're continuing to see stronger shopping conversion rates and lower CPCs, despite all the competitors on the shopping landscape actually increasing and continuing to discount across UGG's products. So on top of the really strong performance, as the product is fully automated, it also helped to drive efficiencies for the team and allowed us to serve ads for a wider range of products and uncovered new opportunities. So now I'm going to hand over to Tom just to summarize the key takeaways.
Cheers, Stevie. So yeah, if we want you to take away 4 key things from today, firstly, it's the fact that more people than ever are shopping online, and Katie from Google has demonstrated that the customer journey is becoming a lot more complex, and so that need to understand performance over time and on a more holistic basis is becoming more important. Also, e-commerce competition is increasing with the share of shopping spends as part of the broader marketing mix increasing. Brands and retailers then naturally need to try and gain that advantage on the competition. We also touched on making sure that the foundations of any shopping feed are tight, watertight, to make sure that any of the smarter thinking has the great foundations to be built on. And then finally, to think laterally about the rich data sets that are available to inform strategy. We've spoken about all of these other types of metrics that are attributed to products, and ultimately, end of the day, that's what we're in the industry to do, is to sell those products on the e-commerce landscape. So look beyond the performance metrics, your clicks, impressions, spend, etc., and look more broadly as well to gain that competitive advantage. And that was it in terms of the content. We've got some time left over to field a couple of the questions in the Q&A. So I will come out of the share and we can have a look at a couple of them. So I work for a fashion retailer with a wide range but shallow inventory levels. So the turnaround of stock is fast. How much time and volume is needed to identify strong fundamentals, etc.? Will it learn fast enough? So I guess I can take that one. So in terms of fast turnaround of stock, I think it's obviously a kind of a good thing in that they're not stocked for a longer period of time. However, at the same time, I appreciate availability is also then probably something that's important as well, and making sure that that's also in as well. The point around the time and the volume piece, though, we can cast a wider net on this type of analysis, and we'd recommend doing that. So I think Stevie may have touched on it, but we kind of cast we run analysis to understand how far we need to look back to understand what that performance looks like. So for one of our clients, we look on a 7 and a 14-day basis, because we know that is enough time to kind of pick up on the trend, because the broader inventory in the product portfolio is more. However, if the data that you're mentioning is a little bit less, because it's smaller inventory levels and a quick turnaround, we can just cast that wider net, so we can look to see what performance looks like on like a rolling 30-day basis, or even longer if we need to. I don't know what category you work in, but also yeah, that's the sort of thing that we would recommend, is through that data discovery, is to understand at what volume do we need to kind of reach that statistical significance, really, to evaluate performance. And then one from Gemma here. So, hi there, is there a recommended minimum number of items in a feed that makes this solution viable, so that there is still enough data for the campaigns to be split and still be optimally optimized optimally by Google's algorithms. So I guess I kind of touched on that in the previous one, but I guess, I don't know, Stevie, if you have any points around like SKUs and from a campaign building perspective, you know, if we need to make sure that we're not spreading ourselves too thin in that sense.
Yeah, I think the main thing is just to ensure there's obviously enough volume going in through each of these SKUs. So obviously, if there's a small amount of SKUs where we're not seeing a huge amount of volume, then you know it probably would be beneficial for those to be lumped in with other SKUs which are actually have more volume. So I think, yeah, I think back to what Tom was saying, I think, yeah, it's fine to basically have the campaign splits as they are. And I think obviously with the prioritization that we've got going on, it's going to favor things where we are seeing strong performance in the first instance. So it should be fine. It might just mean that your lower performing or poor fundamental labels maybe aren't getting the volume that they would need anyway because they're underperforming. So it shouldn't be too much of an issue.
So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And last, we've got one here. I think this is probably best fielded by you, Katie, at Google. But how does this kind of rollout of smart shopping, how is it impacted by Performance Max and the rollout there?
It really shouldn't. I mean, I think at the end of the day, Performance Max is going to be about aligning to the marketer's goal. So, you know, as long as you are giving the system and the campaign the data and the targets that it needs, it can still be a dynamic campaign. The goal of it is that it's going to simplify your life. It's going to find more reach. And instead of having multiple campaigns that you need to manage, it's going to simplify it into one that you can then find more customers and hopefully achieve a better return. I think we're saying that there's roughly a 13% uplift in performance. So, you know, I think this coupled with an increased data-driven approach is going to be really beneficial in the long run.
Awesome. I know a lot of people are really keen on the next steps there for Performance Max. So we'll keep a beady eye out for all of the latest releases from Google there.
Yeah, lots more to come there.
Awesome. We have another one.
To quickly, point out as well with Performance Max. Obviously, I know you're probably wondering, like, can we still do exactly the same approach? But because we are using custom labels, it does work in exactly the same way. So we can still split the campaigns by custom label as we do now for Smart Shopping. So it would be exactly the same for anyone wondering.
Awesome. Thanks, Stevie. We also have one here. So how would you advise a startup e-commerce to first use a small budget of £300 to £500? And should this be split, i.e. shared with Google Ads? I don't know, Stevie, if you want to pick up on that, just yeah, how would what would the jump off point be for someone that's looking to dip their feet in this platform?
I think really, you know, even if you've got a small budget, it's still going to be relevant. I think going back to kind of the last question, it might just be that a lot of the budget is then pushed into the high performing, strong fundamental labels. What we found on UGG actually is when their budgets are sometimes limited some months, we just kind of cut off those low performing fundamental labels. Like I might even just put the budget at even just £5 if we're really struggling on budget for the month, because we expect those kind of products to underperform. I don't really see, there's not really much value in serving them if the budget's really sort of stretched. It kind of makes more sense to push that spend into the high performing labels. So that's definitely an option. If budget's kind of limited, you can even just pause those poor fundamental labels altogether and just push all of the spend into the high performing ones.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think it's yeah, just making the most of the capabilities of those labels. Speaking of labels, we've also had another one come through here. So there are only 5 custom labels, and we're already using 4 of them. How do you do this? And can you split out bestsellers only? And then also a question to Google: any chance of more custom labels, Katie? Let's start with Stevie. We'll start with Stevie first.
I can take the first one. So it's fine if you're actually using 4 of them, because the labels actually only go into one custom label. So say, for example, we only need to use custom label 0. You're actually allowed 1,000 unique labels per custom label. So you only need to use 1 And then we have all the labels beneath that, say custom label 0. So you actually only need to use one for data-driven shopping.
But I'll make the request to the engineers. I'll see if I can add that to the list.
Love that. Perfect. Yeah, Camilla's just said perfect. Thanks for the clarification. So that's cool. Nice. I think we've got one more here. So how long does the process take from start to finish? So I guess I can field that. Ideally, really, it's probably a 6-week period from start to finish, from that kind of initial data discovery to activation. The main kind of bulk of the work, I suppose, is really kind of more around the analysis and stress testing of the labels. So where we've rolled this out across a couple of clients and a couple of specific categories, we know that the distribution is different based on how much inventory they have and the number of product categories they run across and the number of campaigns that they have. So really kind of building out that kind of customizable piece and making sure that it's relevant to the brand or the retailer and their performance is the most kind of consultative part. The actual algorithm and everything we've kind of built and productized, so it's really kind of that activation and jump off point to make sure that we're able to kind of drive performance in the longer term. It is where the time normally takes. And then one more here, I think this one's for you, Stevie. So in terms of time saving, what can I expect if I was to do something like this?
Yeah, so actually across UGG, we found that it was saving the team roughly 2 hours a week. Before, we were really sort of pulling that data out of that price competitiveness report and then using that to sort of tweak bids. We were also pulling out bestsellers and things like that, but this is kind of all covered by data-driven shopping. So there's no need to pull out push items or bestsellers and put it into a separate campaign, because with the prioritization that we've got as part of data-driven shopping, that does all of that for you. So yeah, we found on average 2 hours a week it was saving us. So it made a big difference.
That's great. Yeah, I guess that's the one of the things that we wanted to speak around as well, is that automation part. And it's not just efficiency in terms of kind of being smarter with how we're spending the money, but it's also being smarter with how we're kind of spending that time, right? And making sure that we can prioritize all of the fun stuff like activation and kind of longer term planning within paid search too. I think that's it. So yeah, happy to kind of round off there. I think speak for everybody that we're very thankful for your time today and hope that you found it really valuable. Thank you very much for attending. We hope you found it informative, and we'll speak again soon, I'm sure. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Thanks everyone.